This is Algebra Lesson 2-5, literal equations and formulas. A literal equation is an equation that involves two or more variables, such as distance equals rate times time, or sometimes you get y equals 3x minus 6, or you might get something like x plus y equals 12. Okay? No matter what the case is, there's always two variables in that equation. There could be more than two, but there has to be at least two. A formula is an equation that states a relationship among quantities. Formulas are special types of literal equations. It's kind of like this. Poodles are dogs. Okay, a poodle is a special type of dog. Not all dogs are poodles, but all poodles are dogs. So not all literal equations are formulas, but every formula is a literal equation. Some examples are, let's say the formula for perimeter. Perimeter is equal to 2 lengths plus 2 widths. The formula for finding the, let's go with the area of a trapezoid. Area is equal to base 1 plus base 2 divided by 2. Okay, those are all formulas. When you work with literal equations, you can use the methods previously learned to isolate any particular variable. Treat all the other variables like they were numbers. They're like terms if and only if they're the same variable raised to the same power or with the same subscript. Like in the formula above, I have b1 and b2. b1 is not the same as b2. They are two different things. So if I have an equation like number 1 here, which says solve the equation 3x plus y equals 10 for y, and then it says what does y equal if x equals 1 and x equals 3? Since it's asking us to solve it more than one time, it's better for us to solve it for y first. Then we can plug in what 1 is and what 3 is pretty easily, rather than having to plug in x equals 1, solve the equation for y, and then do it again, plug in x equals 3, and then solve the equation for y again. So the first thing we're going to do is solve the equation 3x plus y equals 10, and we're going to solve it for y. So if I have this equation, I'm just going to write it down over here, 3x plus y equals 10. I need to get y all by itself. Well, what was done to y? Well, 3x was added to it, so I need to subtract 3x from it. Minus 3x on this side, minus 3x on this side. Notice the 3x is not underneath the 10 because those are not like terms. 10 and negative 3x are not like terms. 10 is like saying pineapples. Negative 3x is like saying bananas. I can't add them together and get either more bananas or more pineapples. I get fruit salad. So in this case, when I simplify this, my 3x's cancel out, and I get y equals 10 minus 3x, or you could write it as y equals negative 3x plus 10. I will normally write it like the second form. Reason being is because that's in what we call slope-intercept form, which you'll use later on in this in Algebra 1. So I tend to put my variables before my constants. So if I have a term with a variable in it, I put it before a term that does not have a variable with it. Either one is correct, y equals 10 minus 3x or y equals negative 3x plus 10. So we've solved those for y. So that's the first thing that we were asked to do. The second thing we were asked to do is then solve it if x equals 1 and x equals 3. So if x equals 1, and I have y equals negative 3 times x plus 10. So that would give me negative 3 times 1 plus 10. So that's negative 3 plus 10, which happens to be 7. Right? And if x equals 3, y equals negative 3x plus 10. Negative 3 times 3 plus 10, which is negative 9 plus 10, which is 1. So it's so much easier to plug in numbers, especially if they ask you to plug in more than one. If they would have asked you what does y equal if x is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, it would be a whole lot easier to solve this equation when you already have it in y equals form, which is why we need to learn to solve a literal equation for whatever variable they specify. And for some reason, as soon as we start adding more variables and less numbers, people get a little bit confused on this. The properties stay the same. You still do the same rules you did before, but now you're just looking at what variable do you want to get by itself and how do I get that variable completely by itself without having anything else interfere. Let's look at number 2. Solve 4 equals 2m minus 5n for m. Okay, so we have this equation, 4 equals 2m minus 5n. And we're solving it for m. So I need to get m by itself. So if I look at the right-hand side of the equation, I have 2m minus 5n. Well, 5n is subtracted from 2m, so I'm going to add 5n to both sides of the equation. And again, it is not like terms with anything, so I don't put it under the 4, because that doesn't become 9m, because 4 cannot be added to 5n. That's like saying I'm going to add quarters to dollar bills, and I add them together, and I'm going to get all dollar bills. If I had 4 quarters and I have $10 bills, now I only have suddenly have $14 bills? No, it doesn't work that way. So you have to add like terms. So this becomes 5n plus 4 equals 2m. Well, I don't want to solve it for 2m. I want to solve it for 1m. So I'm going to divide everything by 2. Okay, now this can be written in 2 different ways. So we've canceled all this out. So m equals 5n plus 4 all over 2, which is the way I actually prefer it. Or you can write it separately. M equals 5n over 2 plus 4 over 2. Well, as you can clearly see, 4 over 2 can be simplified, which means that could be rewritten as m equals 5n over 2 plus 2. So there's 3 different ways to write that same equation. I prefer the first way. Other people prefer the second or the third way. All 3 ways are fine. All 3 ways are correct. Okay? If they asked you to simplify, the second way is not correct. Only the third way and the first way would be correct. All right, now they say what? Find the values of m when n is negative 2, 0, and 2. Okay, so when n is equal to negative 2, we're going to have m equals 5 times negative 2 plus 4 all over 2. So that would be negative 10 plus 4 all over 2, which is negative 6 divided by 2, which is negative 3. So when n is 0, that's going to be m will equal 5 times 0 plus 4 over 2. So that's going to be 0 plus 4 all over 2, which is 4 over 2, which is just 2. And last but not least, when n equals 2, that's going to be m will equal 5 times 2 plus 4 all over 2, which would be 5 times 2 is 10, plus 4 is 14 all over 2, which is 7. So the solution to the equation, m equals 5n plus 4 all over 2, and then when n equals negative 2, 0, and 2, your answer is negative 3, 2, and 7. So to write the answer to this, you could either do it just like I showed you here, or you could rewrite it and say m equals 5n plus 4 all over 2, put a semicolon, and the answers in the order they were written is negative 3, 2, and then 7. Okay, so it doesn't matter to me which way you write your answers as long as you show your work and I can figure out what you're doing. Always box or circle your final answer though, so we know for sure that it is actually the last answer. All right, when you rewrite literal equations, you may have to divide by a variable or a variable expression. When this happens, you have to assume that the variable or the variable expression is not equal to 0 because division by 0 is not defined. When you get into Algebra 2, division by 0 is still not defined, but what we will do is we'll go one step further and we will give you a domain and a range for this. We won't do that in Algebra 1, we'll leave that for Algebra 2, but we'll go on to say, because we know the division by 0 is not allowed, these are the only instances in which you could have this particular equation. So for all of our equations, we're going to just assume that our variable cannot equal 0. So number 3 here says solve negative t equals r plus px, and we're going to solve this for x. All right, so I need to get anything with an x all by itself. So that means I need to get this px by itself. So the first thing I'm going to do is subtract r. So I have either negative t minus r or negative r minus t, I don't think it matters, is going to equal px. I need to solve this for x, so I'm going to divide by p. And if I divide by p here, I have to divide everything by p. So x equals negative r minus t all over p, or if I separated it, x equals negative r over p minus t over p. Either way is correct. Either way is fine. Some people prefer the first way I wrote it. Some people prefer the second way I wrote it. It really doesn't matter. Both of them are correct. Number 4, solve a divided by x minus b divided by x equals c, and we have to solve this for x. And I'm looking at this going, ooh, fractions. Okay. I don't want to solve it for 1 over x. I want to solve it for x. And right now, x is in my denominator. I somehow have to get x to my numerator. To do that, the easiest way to do that, clear the fraction. Just like as if it was a over 2 and b over 4, we're going to find a least common denominator, which in this case happens to be x. So I'm going to multiply everything by x. So I'm going to have x over 1 times a over x minus x over 1 times b over x will equal x over 1 times c over 1. Doing that, these x's cancel out. That leaves me with a. These x's cancel out. That leaves me with minus b. And that equals x times c. Well, I need x by itself, not x times c. So what I'm going to do is divide by c. So now, if I do that, x equals a minus b over c, or x equals a divided by c minus b divided by c. All we did was separate this. A minus b all over c means a is divided by c and b is divided by c because the entire top of the fraction is divided by c, which is why we can separate it and make sure that each part of the numerator is divided by the denominator of c. So there we have that answer. And of course, we have to assume that c does not equal 0. Okay, because if c equaled 0, that would be an undefined equation, and that would not work. That's why we assume that the variable cannot equal 0. All right, there are some special formulas that you should be fairly familiar with. If you're not, here they are. They're good to know. If you don't know them, then hopefully by the end of this class, you will know them. Some of them you might know by heart, and some of them might be new to you. Some of the most popular ones, the perimeter of a rectangle. The formula is perimeter is equal to 2 lengths plus 2 widths, where P is perimeter, L is length, and W is width. Circumference of a circle, C equals 2 pi r, where C is your circumference, R is your radius. Pi is not a constant. Well, pi is a constant, but it's a never-ending number. It's an irrational number. It never ends. Some people think of it as being 3.14. That's its most easy term to remember it as. It's approximately 3.14. Area of a rectangle. Area equals LW, which is length times width. A equals area, L equals length, W equals width. Area of a triangle. Area equals 1/2 BH, or sometimes that's referred to as BH divided by 2. Capital A is your area, B is your base, H is your height. Area of a circle. Capital A equals pi r squared, well, where capital A equals area and r equals your radius. And you're squaring it on this formula. Distance traveled. Distance equals rate times time. D for distance, R for rate, T for time. And this last formula is something you probably don't know, but it should be something you're familiar with because many, 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 many countries do temperature only in Celsius. Canada does temperature only in Celsius. The only other country that does temperature in Fahrenheit, I don't even believe the UK does it. It's just very few countries still use what we call the customary system. Britain uses the customary system for some things and Celsius for others, kind of like us. We use the metric system for certain things and the customary system for other things. We're just reluctant to change, don't know why. Okay, but the temperature formula for converting to convert Fahrenheit to Celsius is 5 nines times the Fahrenheit temperature minus 32. All right, so let's take a look at applying some of these formulas. So it says, what is the length of a rectangle with an area of 98 square inches and a width of 14 inches? Well, the first thing we're going to do is know what our formula is. Formula for the area of a rectangle, area equals length times width. And I will always use a cursive L so it doesn't look like an I or a 1. All right, so since it's asking for the length, I'm just going to solve this equation for length. So if I solve this for length, I'm going to divide by W, divide both sides by W, so the length is equal to the area divided by the width. Now I'm going to plug in what I know. So the length is equal to the area, which is 98, divided by the width, which is 14. So I'm going to take 98 and I'm going to divide it by 14, and I'm going to get 7. So my length is equal to 7. So what is the length of a rectangle? Well, the length is 7, and we should label it. And it would be in inches, right? Because lengths are always in linear measurements. Areas are in square measurements, like square inches, but the length or the width would just be in inches. All right, number 6 here. Pacific gray whales migrate annually from the waters near Alaska to the waters near Baja California, Mexico, and back. The whales travel a distance of about 5,000 miles each way at an average of 91 miles per day. That's a lot of swimming. About how many days does it take the whales to migrate one way? All right, so we're looking for distance. The formula for distance, if you refer back to that chart, is distance equals rate times time. Now our question is asking us how many days, which means that's time. It's asking us a time thing. So I'm going to solve this equation for time, since that's what we're supposed to be doing anyway, is solving equations for specified variables. So if I divide by r, time is equal to distance divided by rate. Okay, so my time is going to be my distance, which is 5,000 total miles, divided by my rate, which is 91 miles per day. Okay, and this is miles. This is miles per day. So obviously the miles are going to cancel out, leaving me with my time in days. If I take 5,000 on my calculator here and divide it by 91, I'm going to get not a whole number. My time is going to be 54.94505. 94505. So it says how many days does it take the whales to migrate one way? It's going to take about 55 days, because 54.94, you're talking about 55 days. So it will take about 55 days. Remember, it is a word problem, so you need to write it in a complete sentence. It will take about 55 days. That makes sense, because if it was 100 miles per day, it would take 50 days. So it's a little less than 100 miles per day that they travel. So 55 is very reasonable. So that seems like a very reasonable answer. Always check for the reasonableness of your answers so that you have answered the question that was asked and your answer makes sense. All right, our closure question for today. Write this in your notes, please. What situations can best be modeled by literal equations? That is the equation in which you're going to, that is the question you're going to answer in your notes today.